In this exercise, we're going to reconstruct the other layers inside of this composition and their layer masks. We're going to turn all the layer masks on. For example, for the spikes layer, you can turn on the layer mask either by right-clicking on it and then choose Enable Layer Mask. That's one way. Or you can just press the Shift key and click on it in case you're interested in yet another keyboard shortcut. And speaking of keyboard shortcuts, let's take a look at this layer mask by Alt-clicking on it or Option-clicking on it on the Macintosh side of things. And wherever, you may recall, wherever the mask is white, that indicates that the layer will be opaque. And wherever the mask is black is transparent, and wherever we see grays is some level of translucency in between. All right, and so what we basically have is a soft circle. So it's got a nice sharp outline at the outer edges, but on the interior, it's got a little bit of a gradient edge going on. If you Alt-click again on that layer mask or Option-click on that layer mask on a Mac, you can see that that translates to a little bit of a circular cutout all the way around the spike shape. What's interesting about this is the way that Photoshop cuts through the layer but goes ahead and tries to wrap the layer effects around what's left over. And if you don't want it to work that way, if you want to cut through both the layer and the layer effects, then double-click on an empty portion of the layer to bring up the blending options section of the layer style dialog box, and then you can turn on this layer mask hides effects checkbox. I'll go ahead and move the dialog box over so that we can see what's going on in the background. I'll turn that checkbox on, and you can see that it's much more of a clean cut now. The layer mask is cutting through the layer and cutting through the layer effects. When it's off, as by default, Photoshop tries to wrap the layer effects around the remaining portion of the visible layer, the remaining visible elements of that layer. All right, that's what I want in this case. I want the checkbox off, in other words, as by default. I just wanted to show you that that option is there, in case you're curious, in case you want to take advantage of it in the future. Now let's turn on the circle layer, and its layer effects are already turned on, obviously, so that's a good thing. Then I'm going to turn on this layer, that twirly-poo coil layer right there. And that does have that double spiral effect going on inside of it. I do need to turn on its layer effects, though. They're turned off. So let's go ahead and click the eyeball in front of the word effects in order to turn them on. We should also shift-click on a layer mask in order to enable it so that we cut out that central portion there. The thing was the central portion of the coil was just too strong, in my opinion. Check that out. It was way too distracting, so I wanted to get it out of there. And then we've got another version, another variation on the spikes. This one very, very blurry, so that eventually it'll look like the spikes are showing through the circle, and the circle is kind of blurring the spikes away. So we have some glass-like plasticky distortion going on. And let's see if we've got the layer effects turned on. We don't, so go ahead and click in front of the word effects in order to turn those effects on, and then shift-click on the layer mask in order to activate it so that we have some softness around the edges once again, so it looks like the plastic is more opaque around the edges, or that it's refracting the spikes information here. Okay, so that's good. Let's go ahead and twirl these guys closed for a moment just to save some room inside of the palette. And then finally, I'm going to turn on the word tip. And what's interesting about the tip layer here, go ahead and click on it if you will, and then reveal the layer effects. And you'll see that there's a bunch of layer effects that are applied to this layer that are invisible currently, that are turned off. So we've got the drop shadow, that's turned on, and the stroke is turned on, and those are pretty obvious here. But I also had at one point in time, I had an inner shadow, and I had a bevel and emboss effect. That's pretty cool. And a little bit of a color overlay. Might be a little bit too much, but pretty interesting. And a little bit of a gradient effect going on as well. Now, I kind of liked that at one point in time. I liked the complementary color scheme that was going on, and I liked the dimension associated with the text. But bear in mind, and I finally figured this out, that the tip was going to get printed at about a 1/4 inch. It was a dinky little sort of margin icon, and the text just got gummed up and it wasn't legible anymore. So even if it was cool, too bad. So I went ahead and turned these guys off. Now, I could have thrown them away. I could have gotten rid of them. You can take one of these layer effects and you can just throw it in the trash if you want to. Notice that? I just dragged the inner shadow effect into the trash. But why do that? I'm going to undo that modification. Because if you throw it in the trash, you not only turn it off, you not only deactivate it, you also throw away the settings. And you never know. You might want to come back to them. You might say, well, I don't want that color overlay effect. That was too much, but I kind of like the shadow. I kind of like the inner shadow there. That was kind of nice, and I kind of like that bevel. That kind of added a little extra dimension to the text, a little bit of 3D. So you can always come back to it that way. You can always change your mind, and these things don't take up much space in memory. They're just these dinky little sort of bundle of settings, just a few K, and that's it. So might as well keep them for future reference. All right, in the next exercise, we're going to take a look at why things don't really look right. This isn't the final effect we were going for. In fact, notice that the circle itself is kind of gooey and gummy and murky. And we will fix that, you and I together, very shortly, depending on when you play the next exercise.